Remember how as children we were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we answered, well, doctor, teacher, astronaut, ballerina. We believed we would choose one profession and it would be with us for life, like a faithful companion. And our parents said, get a good education, find a stable job, and everything will be fine. But what happens to this childhood dream of predictability in a world where professions disappear faster than we can master them? Where the boundary between work and life just blurs beyond recognition, where the word stability sounds almost like an acronym. Today, this question, what to become, confronts not only graduates, it torments those over 40 and those who have always considered their profession unshakable. Hello, friend. My name is Kaspari. I'm a psychologist, a writer, and a researcher. And this is Humanology, a podcast about who we are, what we hide, and what drives us. Today, we're talking about the most painful transformation of our time, about what's happening to work in the 21st century, about why familiar notions of career are just crumbling before our very eyes, and about how to learn to live and thrive in a world where the only constant is change. So don't go anywhere. It's going to be interesting. So let's start with numbers that make you think. According to Dell Technologies, 85% of the jobs that will be in demand in 2030 haven't been invented yet. Let me say it again so that it just sinks in. All right, here we go. 85% of the jobs that will be in demand in 2030 haven't been invented yet. Yep, there we go. We are preparing people for work that doesn't even exist yet, in a world that we cannot predict. And now look at this from another angle. Oxford research shows that 47% of existing professionals are at high risk of automation in the next 20 years. And we're not just talking manual jobs. Artificial intelligence is already writing news, articles, making diagnoses, analyzing legal documents, creating music, art, you name it. But what's most interesting isn't the technologies themselves per se. It's how they interact with some deeper social and economic shifts. Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman spoke in the early 2000s, I think, about liquid modernity, an era when all solid structures of society begin to melt and take new forms. What seemed unshakable, like family, career, national borders, just becomes mobile, uncertain and temporary. And work is at the very center of this transformation. We are currently experiencing the end of what sociologist Richard Sennett calls the Fordist model of labor. This is a model where you come to a company after you graduate from a university, you work there for like 30, 40 years, you receive predictable salary, predictable pay rise, some social guarantees, and then pension. This is where your identity is closely tied to your workplace and your profession. Well, this model formed over decades and seemed natural, right? But it was a product of specific historical conditions like industrialization, strong unions, welfare states, relatively stable geopolitical situations. And these conditions, they all have changed. And the world of work has changed too. So today, the average American changes jobs 12 times during their career. And in some fields, even more than that. A whole generation has emerged for whom changing jobs every 2-3 years is the norm. It's not the exception. But it's not just about the frequency of change. The very nature of employment relationships has changed. The share of temporary, project-based freelance work is growing. In the US, more than 36% of the workforce is already engaged in the so-called gig economy, an economy of side jobs where people combine multiple income sources, like work on short-term contracts and leave from project to project. And this isn't a temporary phenomenon. This is, in fact, the new reality, people. This is the new reality. So let's just embrace it. Now, let's talk about what all these changes do to us, to our psyche, our identity, our understanding of ourselves. Work for modern humans isn't just the way to earn money. It's a source of meaning. In many ways, it's a structure, some social connections, some self-esteem. And when we meet someone, one of the first questions usually is, what do you do? Our profession becomes part of our identity, of who we are. But what happens when this foundation becomes shaky? Psychologists are documenting the rise of what they call career anxiety, where there is this constant worry about the future, about the relevance of one's skills, about whether your profession will remain in demand tomorrow. And this is especially noticeable among people aged 35, 50, those who have already built their careers within the old model, and suddenly they discovered that the rules of the game had changed. I worked with a client not so long ago, quite an experienced journalist who had written for print publications for like the past 20 years. And when his newspaper closed, and this happens constantly nowadays, he faced not just the need to find a new job, he faced an existential crisis in a way. And he told me, I don't know who I am. I've always been a journalist, but now journalism, as I knew it, is just dying out. So who am I now? And this is a very typical story of our time. American sociologist Anthony Giddens writes about the reflexity of modernity, the necessity to constantly review and consider one's identity under conditions of rapid change. Previously, identity was largely determined externally by our family, by our community, by our tradition, and now it needs to be created by oneself again and again and again and again. So it needs to be created and recreated. And this creates some psychological tension. On the one hand, more freedom of choice, the better. On the other, more responsibility for this choice, and that's already more difficult. And more uncertainty as well that comes with it. Research shows that people working under unstable conditions more often suffer from depression, anxiety, and usually have problems planning for the future. Uncertainty is stress. That goes without saying. And chronic stress destroys not only mental, but also our physical health. But there is another side to it. Psychologist Sherry Turkle, in her research, discovered that generations raised under conditions of instability develop special adaptation skills. They, for example, better handle multitasking. They learn new things faster. They feel more comfortable in situations of uncertainty. There is this special term, career flexibility, and this means the ability not just to adapt to changes, but to use them as certain opportunities for growth. Technologies don't just automate old processes. They create completely new forms of employment relationships. Like, take remote work. It did exist before, but the COVID pandemic definitely turned it from exception to the mass phenomenon. McKinsey research, for example, shows that even after the pandemic ended, 20 to 25% of the workforce in developed countries remained remote 3-5 days a week. And this is like 4-5 times more than before the pandemic. But it's not just about where we work. The very concept of working time and workplace is changing. What sociologists call liquid work emerges, like labor that isn't tied to specific time and specific place, that just flows between various projects, between various clients, and across different roles. Take, for example, the platform economy like Uber, Airbnb, TaskRabbit, Upwork. These companies, they created a new type of employment relationship where millions of people work not as employees per se, but as independent contractors. And they gained more flexibility but lost social guarantees. Or look at the phenomenon of portfolio careers, for example. More and more people don't just change jobs, they combine several professional roles simultaneously. Like in the morning, you are a consultant. In the afternoon, you can be a teacher. And in the evening, you're a blogger. Each role provides not only income, but different types of satisfaction, different social connections, and different opportunities for development. And this changes our understanding of professional identity, in my opinion. If before we were doctors or teachers, now we become portfolio professionals, people who combine different skills and roles in some unique combinations. And stay with me on this one. What comes next will be even more interesting, because now we'll be talking about what skills become truly valuable in the new world and why emotional intelligence might turn out to be more important than technical knowledge. Make sure to stay tuned. So if robots and algorithms can do more and more of what people used to do, what's left for us? What skills become truly irreplaceable? Now, the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report highlights several key skill categories that will be most in demand. And here they are. The first one is creative thinking. The ability to generate new ideas, find some unconventional solutions, see connections between seemingly unrelated things. AI handles tasks well where there are clear algorithms, but still struggles with those that require us to step outside of the existing patterns. So here we need the specialists who can accommodate for that. Now, the second is emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and manage one's emotions, read other people's emotions, build empathetic relationships. And this, to date, remains a deeply human domain. The third is the system thinking, the ability to see the whole, to see and understand some complex interactions, work with multi-level systems. In a world where everything becomes more interconnected, this is absolutely critically important. The fourth is the learnability, the ability to quickly master new knowledge and skills and adapt to change and retrain. In a world where technologies develop exponentially, this becomes a basic survival skill. The fifth comes skills for working with uncertainty, the ability to make decisions under incomplete information, feel comfortable in situations where there are no clear rules, experiment and learn from mistakes. And notice, all these skills are somehow related to human rather than technical abilities. And the paradox here of the technological revolution is that it makes us more human, which is beautiful and perfect. But there is one problem. Our education system isn't yet preparing for such a future. Schools and universities are still largely based on the industrial model. Standardization, memorization, following instructions and all that. But we need creativity. We need adaptability. We need the ability for independent learning. And this creates a huge gap between what is taught and what is needed in the job market. And many graduates discover that their knowledge becomes obsolete much faster than they can apply it, which is obviously very sad. One of the most interesting dynamics of the modern job market is the differences in how different generations react to ongoing changes. Generation Z, born after 1997, has been accustomed to rapid changes, to digital technologies, to multitasking since childhood, really. And for them, changing jobs every 2-3 years, it isn't stress as we would see it, but it's a norm. They more easily accept uncertainty and are much more open to career experiments. Deloitte research shows that 75% of the Generation Z representatives expect to change jobs within 2 years. And this isn't a sign of disloyalty. It's a development strategy. They understand that in a rapidly changing world, stagnation equals regression. The millennials, 1981 to 1996, found themselves in a particularly difficult situation. They started their careers during the 2008 economic crisis, somewhere around then, when many traditional career paths were blocked. They were forced to invent new ways of professional realization, hence the growth of startups, freelancing, creative industries, and all that. But it was millennials who pioneered many trends that now define the job market, like work-life balance and corporate social responsibility and flexible work formats. Generation X, 1965 to 1980, and the baby boomers, 1946 to 1964, they often experience the greatest discomfort from ongoing changes. They build careers within the traditional model and may now feel disoriented in the new reality. I worked with a 52-year-old client, an experienced manager who just lost her job due to restructuring. And she told me that she didn't know how to look for work on LinkedIn. She just never did that before. And she said she couldn't understand what networking is, because in her time, they just submitted a resume and waited for a call, and that's it. There was no LinkedIn and there was no networking thing. But older generations have advantages too. They possess some deep expert knowledge and experience solving complex problems and the ability to work long term. And many of them successfully retrain and adapt to the change. There is even this term now, midlife career anxiety, which is some specific stress of people aged 40 to 55 who understand they need to radically change their approach to career, but don't know how to do it, so they're still searching. And now I want to take a closer look at one of the most controversial trends, and it is the growth of the gig economy. On the one hand, this is liberation, the opportunity to work when you want, with those who interest you and on projects that inspire you and align with your values, and the opportunity not to depend on one employer, diversify risks and build a career as you see fit. But on the other hand, this is a new form of instability, right? There's absence of social guarantees, there is the need to constantly search for new projects, and there is the income uncertainty, blurring of boundaries between work and personal life, many things. Sociologist Guy Standing even introduced the term precariat, a new class of people whose lives are characterized by instability, by temporariness and absence of long-term guarantees. Their incomes are more volatile, which makes planning more and more difficult. But the paradox is that many consciously choose this instability. And here's an important question: how to build a new social safety for a world where traditional employment stops being the norm? Some countries are already experimenting with universal basic income, portable social benefits, new forms of insurance for gig workers. And this is one of the most important political and social tasks of the 21st century. And this is exactly what we are going to be talking next. So make sure to stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Now let's talk about what happens to the boundaries between work and personal life in an era when the office can be anywhere and working hours blur beyond recognition. So the concept of work-life balance emerged in the industrial era when there was clear division: 8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of personal life. And work happened in a specific place, like office, factory, and so on, at specific times, usually 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., with specific people called colleagues. But what happens when your laptop is your office, when colleagues are in different time zones, or when a project requires attention on weekends and during vacation? Sociologist Tiziana Taranova introduced the concept of free labor, that work we perform without even realizing it. Every social media post, every product review, every online interaction, it all creates data that companies monetize. And we work 24/7 without getting paid for it. And for so many modern professionals like entrepreneurs and creative workers and consultants, the boundary between work and life has disappeared completely. Their work isn't what they do, but who they are. I used to work with a client, one successful photographer, who complained, "I can't disconnect. I constantly think about projects. I constantly look for new ideas. I communicate with clients. Even on a date, he would evaluate lighting and think about how this scene could be shot." So where does work end and you begin? This is a typical dilemma of the modern worker. Psychologists call this professional integration, a state when work becomes such an important part of identity that separating it from personality becomes, practically impossible. On one hand, this can be a source of deep satisfaction. When work is a calling, when it gives meaning and energy, integration of work and life can indeed make a person more whole and happy. But on the other hand, this can lead to burnout, loss of personal relationships, and feeling that all life is subordinated to professional goals. Harvard Business School research shows that 60% of high-level professionals work more than 50 hours per week, and 35 of them more than 65 hours per week. And many of them say they can't imagine life any differently. A new term has emerged: work-life integration instead of work-life balance. The idea is that instead of trying to separate work and life, we need to find ways to harmoniously integrate them. And now let's honestly talk about the elephant in the room, right? Yeah, I'm talking about the artificial intelligence and its impact on the future of work. I think this is what everyone was waiting for. So ChatGPT, they launched at the end of 2022, and it became the fastest growing application in history, gaining 100 million users in 2 months. And it showed that AI can indeed perform tasks we considered exclusively human, like writing text, analyzing data, generating ideas, and even programming. But instead of mass layoffs predicted by alarmists, we see a more complex picture. AI doesn't just replace people, it changes the nature of their work. MIT research shows that using AI assistants increases work productivity by 14% on average. But interestingly enough, those who benefit most aren't the most talented employees, but those who previously showed average results. So AI helps them reach the level of the best. And this creates new dynamics in the job market. Those who know how to work effectively with AI get a competitive advantage. And those who ignore these tools just risk being left behind. Completely new professions emerge. Prompt engineers, specialists in creating AI queries, AI trainers, those who teach artificial intelligence, human AI collaboration specialists, experts in organizing joint work of people and machines. And the very essence of many professions changes. Doctors use AI for diagnosis, but they make final decisions and communicate with the patients. Teachers use AI to create educational materials, but they inspire and motivate students. Writers use AI for research and first drafts, but they create unique voice and meaning. Psychologist Sherry Turkle calls this collaborative intelligence, the ability of human and machine to complement each other using each other's strengths. One of the brightest manifestations of changing attitudes toward work is the explosive growth of entrepreneurship among youth. According to Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, 25% of millennials plan to launch their own business in the next 3 years. For comparison, among Generation X, this figure is about 15%, and among baby boomers, it's only 8%. But this isn't entrepreneurship in the traditional sense. Previously, creating a business required significant startup capital, long planning, serious risks. But now you can launch an online business with minimum investment, test an idea in a few days, and scale or close a project quickly and with small losses. Technologies have radically lowered entry barriers. Shopify allows creating an online store in an hour. YouTube becoming a media content creator with an audience of millions. Instagram monetizing any hobby. TikTok becoming an influential opinion leader through a few viral videos. And for many young people, entrepreneurship has become not a career goal, but a lifestyle. They don't want to build one big company for life. They want to constantly experiment. They want to create. They want to try new projects. And the term serial entrepreneur has emerged, someone who launches one project after another. And for them, failure isn't tragedy, it's just an experience. Closing a startup isn't defeat, but an opportunity to apply gained knowledge to the next project. But this approach has dark sides too. Constant pressure for innovation, the need to always be on top, and the cult of success at any cost. Many young entrepreneurs suffer from imposter syndrome, from burnout, from depression. University of California research shows that entrepreneurs are twice as likely to suffer from depression and anxiety disorders compared to regular employees. Uncertainty, which is an integral part of entrepreneurship, is a serious stress factor. COVID pandemic didn't just make remote work mainstream. It also launched a global talent migration that's changing the world's economic geography. The phenomenon of digital nomads emerged. This is people who work online and can live anywhere. By estimates, there are already more than 50 million of them worldwide, and this number is only growing. Countries began competing for these highly qualified mobile workers, creating special visas and special programs. Estonia, for example, they launched digital residency. Portugal created a visa for digital nomads. Barbados offers a year-long work visa for remote employees. And this changes the economics of entire regions. San Francisco is losing IT specialists who move to Lisbon or Mexico City, where cost of living is significantly lower but quality isn't worse. A talented developer can live in Bali, work for a New York company, and receive an American salary with Asian expenses. But this creates new problems as well. Local housing markets in cities popular with digital nomads, they just overheat. Local residents can't compete with newcomers earning salaries in dollars and euros. And there is a new form of inequality between mobile global professionals and place-bound local workers. And this is just the beginning. Experts predict that by 2030, up to 1 billion jobs could be performed remotely. And this is the largest migration in human history, only virtual. The traditional education system is also experiencing a crisis. A university degree, which long served as a ticket to the middle class, is now losing its value. On one hand, the cost of higher education is growing faster than inflation. In the US, the average college graduate has educational debt of approximately $37,000. Many spend decades paying it off. On the other hand, more and more employers are abandoning degree requirements like Google, Apple, IBM, Netflix. They all have publicly stated they are ready to hire talented people without higher education. They value skills, they value portfolios, they value the ability to solve real problems and not papers. Alternative forms of learning emerge, like online courses, boot camps, micro degrees, professional certifications, you name it. Platforms like Coursera and Udemy and Skillshare provide access to knowledge from the world's best experts for small money. And importantly enough, this knowledge is more current. While universities spend years coordinating new curricula, online courses can update in real time, reflecting the latest trends and technologies. But there is also a problem: how to evaluate and certify these new forms of knowledge. How can an employer understand that an online data analysis certificate, for example, really means that the candidate is competent? Some companies solve this radically. They create their own corporate universities and train the specialists they need themselves. Like Amazon, it trains employees in cloud technologies. McDonald's prepares managers at Hamburger University. And now, let's talk about how all these challenges influence our understanding of career success and personal fulfillment. The traditional career model was like a ladder. Clear steps, predictable upward movement, obvious success criteria like junior specialist, specialist, senior specialist, manager, top manager, and etc. And the new career model is more like a labyrinth, like multiple paths. There are dead ends, there are unexpected turns, and the ability to move in different directions all at the same time. Success today is measured not only by money and status, but by meaning, flexibility, balance, opportunities for growth. And psychology Herminie Ibarra, for example, in Working Identity, shows that successful career transitions in the 21st century rarely begin with self-analysis. Instead, people experiment with new roles. They try different projects. They create bridges between old and the new identity. And the term protein career emerged, a chameleon career that constantly adapts to changing circumstances. People with this kind of approach don't follow a pre-made plan, but they rather develop the ability to quickly react to new opportunities. And understanding of professional success is changing too. For older generations, success often meant stability. It often meant status, accumulation. For younger ones, it's more about self-realization, the impact, the ability to change the world. Deloitte research shows that for millennials and Generation Z, the main criteria for choosing work are development opportunities, like 87%, alignment with values, it's 76%, and work-life balance, 75%. Salary is important, but not determining, 68% of respondents. So, what should an ordinary person do in this rapidly changing world? How do we prepare for a future that's simply impossible to predict? Well, first, we need to develop meta skills. The ability to learn, adapt, solve problems is more important than any specific technical knowledge. Because technologies change, but the ability to master new technologies, it remains. The second one is building a portfolio of skills, not specialization. T-shaped professionals, deep knowledge in one area plus broad outlook, are more in demand now than narrow specialists. The third is invest in relationships. In a world where much is being automated, human connections become even more valuable. Your network is your insurance policy in an unstable world. The fourth is we must develop financial literacy. In a world of irregular incomes and absence of traditional pensions, the ability to manage money becomes a critical survival skill. And the fifth, take care of mental health. Uncertainty is stress. Meditation, physical exercises, therapy, support from your loved ones, this isn't luxury anymore, but it is a necessity. And finally, maintain curiosity and optimism. The world is changing rapidly, but this creates incredible opportunities for those who are ready to see and use them. Now, we began this episode today with the childhood question, what to become? And discovered that in the 21st century, this question has acquired a completely new dimension. We no longer choose one profession for life. Instead, we create a unique combination of skills, roles, projects that constantly evolves. We talked about how technology don't just automate old processes, but create completely new forms of labor. About how boundaries between work and life, between office and home, between local and global are just collapsing. We discussed how different generations adapt to these changes, what skills become most valuable, how the role of education and the very psychology of career are changing. And behind all these trends and forecasts are living people, just like you and me, who every day make decisions about their professional future under conditions of unprecedented uncertainty. And yes, the world of work is changing radically. Yes, the old guarantees are disappearing. And yes, the future is unpredictable. But this isn't a reason to panic. It's an invitation to creativity, to experiment, to create new forms of professional life that better corresponds to our human needs. And perhaps the question, what to become, should be replaced with how to be. how to be adaptive in a changing world, how to be true to your values under external pressures, how to be useful in an era when usefulness is being redefined, how to be happy in a profession when the very concept of profession is blurring. And maybe in this very uncertainty lies the main opportunity of our time, the opportunity to create work that truly has meaning, that develops us as people, that makes the world better. Our children will probably work in professions that don't yet exist. But if we teach them today to be curious, to be adaptive, to be empathetic, to be creative, they will cope with any future. And if what we talked about today resonated with you, please kindly like this episode, share it, and subscribe to my channel. And definitely please join my Unshakable People Club on my website at kaspari.com/join. It's a free community where we meet, we share, we nourish each other with living energy and help each other cope with real challenges, including professional ones. And until our next meeting in the space of uncertainty, frightening and beautiful at the same time, full of challenges and opportunities, demanding from us not ready answers, but readiness for constant search, I will leave you with this thought and thank you very much for your time. I will see you in another episode. Bye-bye.